Hello, and happy marvelous Monday, everybody. I hope that you are doing extremely well. Happy July. Can you believe it? We are in the 7th month of the year already. This year has gone by so quickly, so fast. But today, I am excited that you are joining me. I am live on Facebook, I'm live on LinkedIn, and I see that I'm live on YouTube. Thank you so much. Today, we are talking about from promise to problem, handling unpaid security deposit. And for those of you who are new to my channel, thank you so much. I'm Karissa Spann, the abundantly blessed landlord and tenant expert. I'm live on Mondays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, sharing information for landlords as well as tenants. And today's segment is pretty much a follow-up from a conversation that we had some weeks ago about the security deposit. Well, I had a situation that came about where a landlord did not receive their security deposit. As a matter of fact, quite a few landlords reached out to me because they are also in the same situation where they allowed a tenant to move in. They did not collect the security deposit, and they turned around and asked, well, Karissa, what can I do? So I'm going to share the discussion that I had with those individuals with you all today. So for those of you who are landlords, please take notes. If you're a tenant, please take notes because there are some things that you each must know, landlords as well as tenants. But before I get into the discussion, I do want to just put this disclaimer out there that I am not an attorney. Information that I share is not legal advice. If you need legal advice or legal information on this topic or any other landlord and tenant related topic, please, by all means, reach out to a reputable landlord and tenant attorney. Okay. If you have not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please find me on YouTube, Landlord Lyfe with Karissa Spann. Subscribe to that Landlord and that Landlord Lyfe channel. It's for landlords as well as tenants. You can find all of my replays from segments and discussions that I've had on various landlord and tenant related topics on that YouTube channel. Also, when you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll be the first to know when I'm live and online. All right. And so because of the summer, I respect people's time. A lot of people are on vacation. So I promise I'm not going to hold you long, but I do have some valuable gems, some tips that I'm going to share for landlords, for property managers, for those of you who are maybe new investors, or perhaps you're thinking about getting into property management. These are just some things that you want to know. And I know that I have a lot of seasoned landlords and housing providers who tune in. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for your support down through the years. This is what I do. I enjoy sharing information. And I, at the end of the day, hope that it is of value for you all. And if it is not applicable for you today, maybe just hold on to this information or like, tag, and share it with someone else who you think may benefit from this information. So I wanted to just put that information in the atmosphere. I'm going to get right into the segment on today. Let me pull up my tips. I have tips for landlords. And I also have tips for tenants as well, because I do want this information to be applicable and relevant, like I said, to landlords as well as tenants. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining my show today. And for those of you who are just tuning in, I'm Karissa Spann. I'm your host for today's segment. And we're tackling a critical matter. I know that this is the time of the year where a lot of individuals are looking to move because it's the warmer time of the year, just depending on where the property is located. So usually when it's warmer outside, individuals and families, they capitalize off of moving. I do understand and know that in many circumstances and situations when people are moving, they may not have all the funds or the resources to move into a rental property. All right. And so that's what I'm going to touch on today, the security deposit, what it's for, when it's paid, and things that landlords can legally withhold the security deposit for. So this is going to be a recap, and I'm adding more information from my last segment. And so I'm sharing today true story, whereas landlords have allowed tenants to move in with a promise to pay the security deposit. All right. This is a critical matter because I know that this is the time of the year where a lot of people are hit hard financially, maybe because they are coming off a vacation, or perhaps they're planning to go on vacation and they are trying to preserve or reserve as much money as possible. And so when this happens, whereas a landlord allows tenants to move in and they don't pay a security deposit, sometimes that can be a financially challenging situation for the landlord. They find themselves in a predicament where they are really expecting that money to come in. And so today I'm covering the importance of collecting the security deposit before move-in. Today I'm also going to cover the legal steps that landlords can take when this happens, how to navigate that system. I'm also going to provide practical tips and advice for landlords in this situation to protect many of you from going through this in the future. And again, I'm also going to provide tips for tenants, helping them to understand their responsibilities and to avoid disputes. So by the end of this segment, my hope, my goal is to make sure that I'm providing clear and information that is totally understandable. And by all means, if you have questions, comments, remarks, or observations, please drop it in the comment section for me, because I want to make sure that I answer your question. I do not have a problem pausing. I do not have a problem coming back and doing a part 2 to this. Okay, so during this discussion and this session, I'm going to walk you through all of that. I'm going to provide tips for landlords and tenants, because it's so important for landlords to have practical strategies that they can use to prevent this from happening again. And I'm also going to provide, like I said, information for tenants, because I believe that having educated tenants and renters in these rental properties is so important. So again, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to get into it. I'm going to bring the tips up on the screen. So give me one moment as I'm preparing. Let me know where you're tuned in from. Let me know which platform you're watching on, whether you're live on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. I always like to know where my viewers are tuned in from. And if you're watching a replay, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and drop in the comment section, #replay. Let me know that you're watching the replay. And if you have questions on the YouTube channel, drop your question in and I'll come back. I'll respond to your questions. All right, so let me get into my tips for landlords first. I want to get the landlords in the way first, and then I'm going to come back to tenants. So when it comes to the security deposit, I know that many landlords who do have a heart, they will make concession, or they'll make an allowance for tenants to move in with the promise to pay that security deposit somewhere down the line. But here is my tip to you as a landlord. You always want to collect the security deposit before a tenant moves in. That's going to be so important because sometimes when you find yourself in a situation where the security deposit is not paid, it can create a financially challenging situation. So you want to ensure that security deposit is always collected up front. Hello, Prophet Valentine. Thank you so much for tuning in. Collect that security deposit in full before the tenant moves in. Why? Because this will shield you. It will kind of act like a safeguard against potential damage and unpaid rent. And so the security deposit is not a landlord's, well, I'll say it like this. Usually, I would consider that security deposit like cushion in the event that there's damage for that rental property. Maybe there are holes in the walls when the tenant moves out. The security deposit is not to be utilized while the tenant is currently in that lease term. And it doesn't matter if the tenant is on their first year, their second year, their third, their 15th year lease term. As long as that tenant is there, that security deposit should sit in some sort of escrow account. It's not to be used for the landlord's personal use, personal shopping, things of that sort. That is not what the security deposit is for. I know that a lot of people have made the mistake of using the security deposit and did not have it when the tenant moved out. Now, in that situation, and that's a whole other segment, but in that situation, tenants can definitely sue landlords for not returning the security deposit. So I touched on that a little earlier. I'm not going to get too deep in the woods on that, but I do want you to understand that collecting the security deposit before a tenant moves in is always the best thing to do. That's always the best strategy. So here's the second thing. You want to make sure that if the tenant does not pay that security deposit up front, and if you are allowing them to enter into a repayment agreement, that you want to formalize that. Make sure that you get it in writing. Okay, get that in writing, because that minimizes many mistakes and misunderstandings. And, oh, well, I thought you said that I could pay it bi-weekly or 6 months down the road. Please make sure that if you are a landlord, if you're a property manager, and if you are allowing tenants to enter into some sort of agreement, whereas they're paying the security deposit after they move in, make sure that it's in writing. Okay. Make sure that you both sign it. Okay. Always have a written agreement. You want to make sure that you clearly outline the terms and the conditions. You want to also make sure that you provide a schedule for them to pay that security deposit. Why is it important to have it in writing? Because it protects you in the event that you do have to take some sort of legal action. Now, here's what I like to tell landlords, especially those of you who are self-managing your rental property, or maybe you're new, right? You don't want to just have a conversation. You want to document it. And so if you are allowing tenants to move in and pay the security deposit in installments, that's great, right? Because not everybody can afford, hey, Bishop, hey, Facebook Bishop, thank you so much for tuning in. Every tenant cannot afford to pay the full security deposit. Now, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing if you allow your tenants to move in and pay the security deposit in installments. I know that a lot of you do have a heart for your renters and your rental property, but you want to still make sure that you get that agreement in writing and that you have your tenant to sign it. You want to make sure as a landlord that you set clear payment deadlines. So for instance, if you allow your tenant to move in, let's say they pay $500, right, for the security deposit, but the security deposit may be in fact $3,000 or $3,500. You want to set clear payment deadlines. When is the next payment due? All right. So if they pay $500 of the security deposit to move in, the next payment, if it's due on the 5th and the 15th or the 1st and the 20th, whatever the terms are, whatever the deadlines are, you want to make sure that you put that in writing, because you want it to be clear to the tenant when they are supposed to pay. You want to also let them know the methods of which they can pay. Okay. You want to do that because establishing and communicating those clear deadlines for that security deposit, it almost prevents failure from them meeting that obligation, because the tenant can't come back and say, oh, well, I didn't know that you wanted it on the 5th. I thought that you said that as long as I can pay it around the 5th of the month. Because sometimes, things are just maybe not so clear. Maybe they had other things going on and they thought they heard something when in fact you didn't say it. So you want to minimize going down that road, failure of miscommunication and not knowing the deadlines. So please make sure that you understand, Mr. or Mrs. Landlord. Set those clear payment deadlines so that tenants will know when to pay it. Keep them on schedule. Send reminders, okay? Because that's important. Sometimes they could intend to pay it. Something could come up. Life is lifing for a lot of people. People have other financial obligations, and they could use a reminder that, hey, on the 5th and the 20th of the month, don't forget you're supposed to pay an extra $500 towards your security deposit. Send those reminders. It could be a text message, it could be an email, it could be a telephone call, whatever your method is. I'm always recommending and suggesting to remind tenants of what's due, the date that it's due, as well as the amount. That's very easy to do because, like I said, sometimes people might legit not remember. They could, like I said, they could have a situation that's coming up, something's pressing on their mind. Maybe someone got sick, maybe they got sick, became ill, and just totally forgot to pay it. They have the money, but maybe they just flat out forgot to do it. So don't hold that against them, but don't allow yourself to go down a road where now the tenant didn't remember, you didn't remind the tenant, and you're ready to collect the second or that third payment, and the tenant doesn't have maybe all the money, right? And so kind of avoid going down that rabbit hole if you set those reminders. One of the things that I like to do is I'll send out messages to tenants. I'll put it on a schedule. Like, for instance, I can schedule a message today that will go out to my tenants at the end of this month to say, hey, August is here. Don't forget, your rent is due on the 1st. After the 5th, it is late, right? I'm reminding them of when we're going to assess a late fee. Some tenants do appreciate those reminders. But as a matter of fact, put it on your calendar to send that message out to your tenants if you don't know how to schedule it. But I always, always, always recommend setting those clear payment deadlines. So here is my next tip for landlords. If you are considering allowing tenants to enter into like a repayment agreement, make sure that you are setting clear expectations and policies for yourself. So for instance, if you have a tenant who maybe they don't have the most desirable background check, you can implement a conditional approval system. Now, in some jurisdictions, it's a requirement anyway, just because the laws have changed. But make sure that when you implement this system, that tenants know and understand what that process looks like. So here is something else, excuse me, I want you to know and understand. So when it comes to conditional approval systems, you must know and understand the law as a landlord. That's so important. Because if you don't know what you can and cannot do legally, you can very easily find yourself in a situation, in a legal situation that could come back to haunt you. So please make sure that you understand what the law says that you can and cannot do. Okay? So here's my next tip for landlords. Then I have tips for tenants. If you allow tenants to move in, and let's say maybe they are not keeping their end of the agreement. They're not paying that security deposit. They're not paying it on time, or they're flat out not paying it at all. Consider giving an incentive for them to pay their payment timely, because you want to take some of the burden. You want to take some of the stress off of tenants. Now, in some jurisdictions, you cannot take a tenant to court if they have not paid the security deposit. That law is not applicable everywhere. So you have to know and understand, like I said, what the law is so you can enforce your lease. But in a situation where you have the laws that are strongly in favor of tenants. For instance, some jurisdictions in California, some jurisdictions in New York, Washington, D.C., in the areas that are pro-tenant, where the laws are strongly in favor of the tenant, you can't take them to court because they have not paid the security deposit unless the law says that you can do so. That is a harsh reality to a lot of people, especially those of you who have a heart for what you do. You have a heart for tenants. And for those of you who recognize that sometimes people just don't have the money, you let them move in with the promise to pay. Let's say you do get it in writing and they still don't pay. Offer incentives for them to pay it. Encourage them to promptly pay it. Give them maybe a discount off of their rent payment. Maybe let them know that if they pay it online, you would give them a gift card or something. Just be creative in your incentive, because this can definitely help improve the cash flow, and it could also likely reduce tenants making the payments late. So encourage them, give them an incentive to pay, and reward them to pay it on time. Should they be paying it? Absolutely. But we know that things happen and people don't always hold true to their agreement. Things happen in life that prevents them from doing so. Give them an incentive and see if that will work out. And so these are just some of the tips that I shared with landlords who actually are in a situation where tenants moved in with the promise to pay and did not pay the security deposit. So here are some tips I want to share for tenants on today, because I want tenants to know and understand that they are important and that they also have rights as well as responsibilities. So my tips for tenants on today is this. Definitely understand the importance of that security deposit. Know what it's for. Know why you're paying it. And then also know and understand that when you pay that security deposit, you will get that back when you move out, as long as you return that rental property to its original condition as when you first moved in. So for instance, this wall behind me, right? If there are no spots in the walls, if there are no holes in the walls, when I first moved in, when I move out, it should look the same way, right? And so if there are holes, if it's damaged, that means that the landlord can deduct from that security deposit. You want to make sure that also when you move out, you move everything out, and then you do a walkthrough inspection with that landlord. You both sign a move out inspection together. And if there are any issues, if there are any concerns, you as well as the landlord are seeing those things at the same time, and that should be documented. Okay? But you have to know and understand what the security deposit is for. The security deposit is not like a loan where you give to the landlord. And let's say maybe it's Christmas time or an emergency comes up and you need some cash. You cannot go back to your landlord and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, I would like to borrow some of that security deposit that I paid when I moved in because I have an emergency. My dog has to go to the vet and I need $500. The security deposit is not a loan. You cannot go to the landlord and ask to borrow that money. Okay? That's not what it's for. Here is another tip for tenants. Please always be honest, be upfront about your financial situation. More than anything, I know that hate is a strong word, but I absolutely hate when someone promises to do something and they don't do it. Listen, I do believe that treating your business like a business, you should be paid like it's a business. And if you are treating your business like it's a hobby, it should pay you like a hobby. But for those of us who do have a heart to help tenants, we want to help people who may have a tough time, because there were a few times in my life where I needed help, right? And I appreciated people who were there to help and support me. And so I take that and I pay it forward. And so I'll give tenants an opportunity, even if they don't have the best background check. I'll still give them, just depending on the situation, an opportunity to get into that rental property and do the right thing. Does it always work out? In many cases, it does. But then there are situations like the scenario, the story I'm sharing today, where a landlord, several landlords actually allowed tenants to move in and they didn't pay it. Sometimes that does happen. But I hate more than anything if a person is dishonest out the gate. They know that they're not going to pay it. They'll get in, promising to do all the right things, right? And when they get into the rental property, you meet the real person and they end up not doing anything that they said that they were going to do. I hate that more than anything. And I hate that it happens to people who are not aware, who are maybe self-managing, or maybe they're just getting into the industry. This is why I share this information every week. You can go back and you can watch many of my replays, different topics, different sessions on various matters, all landlord and tenant related. But as a tenant, please make sure that you're honest and you're upfront about your financial situation. Here's why that's important. Because if you find someone like myself who's willing to take a chance on you, I can rock with honesty. But when it comes to lies and manipulation and deceit, that's something that's a no-brainer for me. True story. Let me take this down. True story. I had a young lady. I was giving her a break. I conducted the background check. Now, this was many, many years ago. I conducted the background check. I told my team, I said, listen, we're going to give this young lady a pass. Her background check didn't clear, but we're going to take a chance. We're going to give her a pass. I said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to verify her landlord references. So reached out to the young lady. Hey, listen, we're going to move forward with the application. We just need to verify your landlord and tenant history. Did also explain to the young lady that she did not pass the background check, but that we were also going to take this chance on her because we wanted to give her, an opportunity to rent this place. Told her that in the beginning. What did she do? She turned around and she provided the name, the telephone number of a friend who was the alleged landlord. Okay, so she provided the landlord's name. Now, we had already conducted the background check. We had already pulled the background report, and it showed that she had been evicted. Now, it was a few years prior, but on the application, she lied and said that she was never evicted. Okay, so that's an automatic denial, just depending on where the rental property is, because that's fraud. If you lie and say that, you have never been evicted and you just can't do that, right? So anyway, this young lady, she lied on the application. She said that she had never been evicted. When we conducted that background check, we discovered that she in fact had been evicted, but we were still willing to rent to her. Called her and said, hey, listen, you didn't pass the background check, but we're still going to take a chance and you just provide us with your landlord's information so we can call and verify, right, that you've actually recovered, regrouped, or recalibrated, whatever, right? So she gave us the name, the contact number to a friend. So we contacted the friend, assuming that this was her landlord. Now, where this young lady lived was a large apartment community. I know the owners, I know the corporation very well. So when she provided that information, I thought that, okay, well, maybe that's a little odd. That's not the office number. Okay, maybe it's a new property manager and she wants to give me the cell phone number. I'll give it a try. Call the person. They answer the phone. We say, hey, we're calling from ABC Company. We're trying to conduct this background check. The applicant, so-and-so, provided your name to verify the landlord and tenant history. So we're asking questions like, okay, well, can you tell me when she moved in, how much her rent payment is, how many times she's been late on the rent? So the young lady says, oh, well, I don't have that information right now. I'm a new manager. I'm not in the office right now. I said, okay, not a problem. Thank you so much. Who's a regional manager, please? The young lady said, oh, I don't know the regional manager name. So here we go. Here we go with the drama and more lies and more game. So how are you a property manager? You don't know who hired you. You don't know the regional manager name. I said, okay, not a problem. You don't know the regional manager name. What is the number to the corporate office or an email to someone in the corporate office? She didn't have that information either. So I just thanked the young lady for her time. Knew it was a scam going on anyway, because like I said, the young lady lived at a large apartment community that I was very familiar with. So had my team member to reach out to the young lady, say, hey, listen, we tried to verify the information that you gave to match it with your landlord. Didn't come back clear. We were not able to complete that background check. So she gave us another number, which was another fake. So now I step in. I call the young lady after this attempt and I said, listen, we were willing to take a chance on you, right? Because we conducted a background check. We see that you have been evicted and we were willing to work with you. But because you have provided inaccurate information, that's fraud. We're just going to go ahead and deny the application. You'll get something in writing. And we, in fact, followed up immediately in writing because that's the law. That's what you're required to do as a landlord. If you are denying the application, you are required to follow up in writing to let the applicant know that the application has been rejected or denied and the reason why, right? So we did that. So the young lady, I wished her well in her journey, said, I wish you all the best, hung the phone up. She was like, well, I'm sorry. I didn't think that. At that point, it didn't even matter, right? Because she had lied and she just could not be truthful, right? To save her life. So anyway, she called back. I think maybe a month later, she was still looking and people were, she was still looking to rent a place. She was applying and everybody was turning her down. So she remembered little old me, right? She remembered us. We were willing to give her a chance. So she called back. She says, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I do apologize. And I wanted to know if the apartment was still available. Well, unfortunately, we had not, we had already rented the property. It wasn't available anymore. And so unfortunately for her, she did not get that opportunity. And so I'm sharing this with you as tenants, as renters, as applicants. Always be honest, be upfront about your situation because people just may take a chance, give you a shot to get in and do the right thing. Because people recognize that when you have situations, financial situations that come up in life, you're not the only one. There are so many great, successful people who have gone through in life, had temporary financial challenges and just didn't have it. And so as a way to pay it forward or to give back, they'll be willing to take a chance. But when you are deceitful and you're lying or you're trying to manipulate the system, that usually never works well in your favor. All right. So always be upfront, be honest about your financial situation. So here is another tip for you as a tenant. If the landlord is going to agree and allow you to rent that property, please make sure that you get it in writing. Because a landlord can say, hey, yes, sure, you can make the payments, as long as you pay your rent by the 5th, you can make the extra payment by the 15th, right? But if it's not in writing, that landlord doesn't have a reminder. Maybe they don't remember that they told you the 15th. And they come to you on the 10th and they say, well, you're supposed to make the payment on the 10th. And you say, wait, hold up. You promised I can make my security deposit payment on the 15th, right? And so that's also your safeguard. So make sure that you get all agreements in writing because it also protects you. It protects the landlord, but it also protects you. And that minimizes the landlord saying, okay, well, we changed the terms. Yes, we said the 10th, or maybe we did say the 20th. And now we're turning around and we're saying we need it by the 10th. Well, if it's in writing, you can't change it, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord. Too bad, so sad. You made it. Oops, you got to live with it. So please always get that in writing. Another tip for you as a tenant, respect payment deadlines. If you have someone that's willing to take a chance on you, they're allowing you to get into this rental property, not pay that security deposit up front. And if you're making payments monthly, respect those deadlines because here's the thing. Some landlords are not rich, right? They are giving you the opportunity to move in. They're trusting that you're going to do the right thing. Keep your word. Because now in some jurisdictions, landlords can take you to court for not paying the security deposit. It just depends on the law. The laws are not the same everywhere. And I don't want you to assume either way. I don't like assuming. I like to know the actual factual. Either you can, either you can't, right? So respect those payment deadlines. Say what you mean and mean what you say. And if you cannot make that payment reach out to that landlord and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, I know I promised that I would make that payment by the 10th of the month, but I really don't have it. Is it okay if I pay you Friday when I get paid? Or whatever your situation is, go ahead and communicate that. Let that landlord know, because that shows that you're being accountable. It shows that you're responsible, and it shows that you're really trying to do the right thing. Because a landlord, I promise that most of them are not mind readers. Most housing providers, and I've been in property management for well over 20 plus years. I'm a licensed property manager amongst a lot of things in this rental industry, but I've not seen a class that's offered to us as housing providers to learn to read minds and know what a tenant really means. So if you say you're going to pay it, we don't know that you actually meant you're going to pay it maybe 2 days later, or a week later, or 3 weeks later, if at all, right? So please make sure that you respect those deadlines. And here is a final tip for tenants on today. Always, always, always. Did I say always? Always conduct a pre-move-in inspection of that rental property. So here is what that looks like. Before you move in, before you sign the lease. So let's say, for instance, let me pull this down. Let's say, for instance, you are doing a walkthrough of the property. You really like the place. The landlord has promised to make repairs, right? Maybe there were some doors off the hinge. Maybe the toilet needed to be replaced. Maybe they actually needed to repaint a wall, okay? When you first looked at it, there were some paint cans, maybe a ladder or something. It was some left behind items in that rental property under the cabinet, in the washing machine, whatever, right? The landlord promised that, oh, before you move in, we're going to make sure we get this taken care of for you. And they should, right? But sometimes that does not happen. I am not surprised when I hear people complain that they moved into a situation, not a rental property, but they moved into a situation that the landlord never took care of. And now they were looking to move out of that rental property. I want to prevent you as a tenant from moving into a situation. You want to move into a rental home. And it doesn't matter if it's an apartment, if it's a condo, if it's a townhouse, a single family home. It doesn't matter what the rental property type is. You want to move into something that is in move-in condition, that's ready for you to move in today. So in a situation where you're doing your walkthrough, you're touring the property, there's trash in the rental property, there are things left behind, there are repairs that are needed, do another walkthrough. So that is the pre-move-in inspection to make sure that everything is done. Now, in a situation where things are not in order, that gives you a little room to negotiate. So come back and say, okay, well, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, when I did the initial walkthrough of the property, I made a note that the bathroom needed to be painted and that the sink needed a new garbage disposal, and just highlight whatever it is that's on your list that needed to be done. That first time, at that first visit, go through that list, recap those things. And when you do that pre-move-in inspection, and if those same things are still incomplete, now you can negotiate, because you don't want to move into a rental property like that. And chances are that landlord may never intend to do it. Now, I don't know either way. I'm not going to make an assumption. Sometimes things happen, and maybe the landlord thought that the contractor or the property manager or someone else cleaned it up, and they didn't. Things happen. But in any event, use that as leverage to possibly negotiate a reduction on the security deposit, a reduction on the first month's rent. Here's what I will tell you on that. You don't know unless you ask. You have to ask, you have to seek, and you have to knock on the door. Sometimes what you don't know can hurt you. Maybe you move in and you didn't know that that landlord would have likely negotiated if you would have asked, if you would have asked those questions, right? And so definitely always do those move-in inspections and that pre-moving inspection because it is so important. All right. And so that's what I wanted to share today, because I recognize, like I said, that this is the time of the year where a lot of people are moving. There are a lot of challenges, financial challenges for people. They don't have all the money to move in. They don't have all the security deposit. And so the question is, what do you do? How do you handle those situations? Because it is unfortunate when these type of situations happen, where tenants are allowed to move in with the promise to pay and they don't pay it. Now, a landlord can enforce their lease if they are in a jurisdiction, if they're in an area that they can take the tenant to court for not paying the security deposit, then that is definitely an option. Okay. I shared information and tips today for tenants. I'm going to do a quick recap for those of you who are just tuning in. I'm asking that you go back and watch the replay, but let me pull up the tips. I shared tips for landlords, because as a landlord, I want you to know and understand what you can and cannot do. And so it's so important. These are the tips that I shared for landlords: to always collect security deposits before tenants move in. That's your best safeguards. And if you can't, if you're willing to allow tenants to move in and pay as they go, make sure that you put it in writing. Formalize it. Get that thing in writing. That way you know what you have allowed this tenant to do. You want to set clear payment deadlines. Let the tenant know when the payments are due. How much is due? Is it on the 1st? Is it on the 20th? You also want to screen your tenants thoroughly and implement or consider implementing conditional approval systems. Okay, that's important, because if a tenant does not meet the criteria, you'll know upfront, and then offer incentives for tenants if you allow them to enter into a repayment agreement to pay that security deposit. Okay, so now I want to share some tips for tenants, because I love my tenants. I'm a landlord and tenant expert. I love my tenants. I want my tenants to also be educated. Okay, I love educated tenants. So here are my tips for tenants on this evening. Okay, tenants, please take notes. Take a picture of the screen if you will, but these are our tips for you. Understand the importance of the security deposit. Know what it's for. Be honest about your financial situation. If you know you can't pay it, tell that landlord you can't pay it. Get that agreement in writing. Don't just have a conversation. Sometimes in communication, things can be lost or misunderstood, not explained, but if you get it in writing, you always know. Respect those payment deadlines. If you say you're going to make that payment by the 5th, make that payment by the 5th. If you say you're going to make that payment by the 20th, make that payment by the 20th. Make those payments online if you can. And then always request a pre-move-in inspection. That is always important. You do have that right. You do have that right to request it. Now, some landlords may not offer that because maybe that's something they've never done before. But again, you don't know unless you ask those questions. So that's the information I wanted to share today. I do hope that this was helpful. I do hope that for those of you who are watching the replay, that you find some sort of value in the information that I shared. Because at the end of the day, my goal is to help a lot more landlords eliminate the possibility of going down a rabbit hole because of what they don't know. Because again, what you don't know can and it will hurt you. So if you have found this information helpful today, I hope that you would share it with someone. Like, tag, and share it. If you have not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do that. You can find all of my replays, all of my prior segments on YouTube. I am also going to pull up my email address because I want you to have that. And let me find my email address. Give me 1 second. If I am live and not online, you can always email me. So many of you who have emailed me, I've responded. Some of you, you have comments that you leave on a YouTube channel. I respond to my comments. That is my email address at the bottom of the screen. info@landlordlife.com. Thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a fantastic pleasure. And again, I hope that this was helpful for you, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord or Mr. and Mrs. Tenant. I shared a lot of information today. So if you're just tuning in, go back and watch the replay. Join me next Monday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find me on Facebook, you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find me on YouTube. Today, I talked about from promise to problem, handling unpaid security deposits. All right, that's what this segment was all about. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Please be safe. I know that it's the summertime. A lot of you are going on vacation. I've gone on vacation, as you can tell. I have a tan or 10. I think I got 10 shades darker. But in any event, be safe. Try to keep cool in all this heat. And I look forward to seeing you all next week right here on the same social media channel, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. I'm Karissa Spann, the abundantly blessed landlord and tenant expert. I look forward to joining you next week, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Bye for now.